psychographed by Divaldo Franco, inspired by Joana de Angelis. Item 81. Jesus said, "Let not your hearts be troubled." Teaching that serenity and trust in God must be the motto of all who desire happiness. There is never a shortage of reason for worry, which unsettle one's heart and life. Human existence is a chance to appreciate eternal values and inner enlightenment. If you trust God with your life and all your worries, everything will unfold naturally. Should a problem arise, serenity will take control and settle the matter properly. Therefore, do not let your heart or mind be troubled by misfortune. Let's close our eyes. Let's think of Jesus, which is the theme of tonight's lecture. Let's ask him to bless us all, and especially our friend Adriano. May Jesus bless him and his words and open our hearts and our minds for the teachings of tonight, so that we could go to our lives and put those words in practice. Bless us all and be with us today and forever. Amen. And without further ado, Adriano.
Okay. Now the easy part, right? Thank you for doing the hard part. Thank you very much. A new year, right? And it's so nice that I come here, starting the year with you, my family, right? It's been 18 years in this country, and it's all you is my family, because since then I didn't see anyone of my family, my blood tie people, and I consider you all part of them, my sisters, brothers, and so forth. And it's so great that we start all together, because even though we have so much hope for the future, and we have so much faith that Spirit brings us, enlightens our head and our heart, we know that we're going to face challenges along the year. Difficulties will come inevitably, because that's all teaches us to grow and evolve even little by little. So in face of that, we're going to need certainly each one's prayer, thoughts, and everything. I don't know if you will, but anyway, I'm gonna be praying for you all just in case if you need. And we're gonna talk a little about Jesus. It's so hard to talk about Jesus, not because we don't know things about Jesus. Certainly, as the character, the person that is most well known in the world. Everyone knows Jesus in some way, and we Spiritists, we grow in Spiritism, listening about Jesus every lecture. Even the topics that are not related to Jesus, we hear about Jesus. We hear some stories, the books that psychographs, stories about the spiritual realm brings examples. So in that way, we are very well versed in Jesus' life. Actually, we Spiritists are the ones in advance knowing about Jesus' life, because most of other religions don't have the spirits to bring them news and informations that only pertain to Spiritism. So in that way, for me to talk about Jesus and not boring you all is hard. So in that way, I decided, I was supposed to talk about Jesus in December. Was coming in here and had an accident on the train line near Valhalla station, and then the train couldn't come at the time. And I was like thinking about how I would say things about Jesus in a way that we relate ourselves every day in our life. And I was reading this book that a friend of ours in our center went to Brazil and asked her to buy some books for youth, in Brazil and bring over to us. And then she brought some books. I didn't know which books she would bring to me, but she brought this book. I started reading. It's by Adelson Salles, and I called The Young Gladiator. Uh, I was like, trying to understand the book and start reading it, and I'll tell a little bit of the stories in the book because it's related to youth. For me, I don't know if the story in the book is really true or not because, even though the most trust books brought the spirits, there's no way that we can prove that it's happened because there's no science facts that we can, even the most trustful spirits bring to us. In that way, because I haven't heard differently, I would say that it's true, even though there's no way that we can prove it. But it's the first book, Psychographed, that talks about the youth, the young people in the primitive Christians following Jesus' footsteps. Because usually we hear adults, very old people or adults going to the cemeteries, following Jesus, being brought to the circus in Rome and so forth. In this book, he tells stories about a lot of young people, 16, 17, 20 years old. In that time, he tells about those stories that these young people from Rome, they were studying Jesus' lessons. And some of them, a lot of them, by the way, went to be brought to the circus and, eaten by the lions. It's so interesting. In that time, the Christians were literally working towards reaching the youth as well as we do today. But a little bit is that, the story tells about this young gladiator. He was very young, and this gladiator, he was the preferred gladiator of Nero, because this story takes part in the Nero time, the Emperor Nero. So this gladiator were the best, and I think no one until that day would, overcome his resistance and his fear. So in that day, Nero, brought a party to the circus and would, of course, bring the Christian people, followers of Jesus, including young people, to be eaten by the lions. So, but before that, he would bring the strong gladiators to make, the feast. They would fight against each other until death. And this young gladiator called Glaucus were the preferred of Nero. However, there were this young man, the Christian young man, very young Christian man. But he was so huge and so strong that Nero decided he had to fight as well in the arena, not only be, put there to death for the lions. So, and another Christian as well were brought to the circus to fight as gladiators. They had no other choice than fight the gladiators. So what happened is, one of the Christian gladiators were brought dead by this fearless preferred of Nero called Glaucus. Actually, by the way, Drusus, not Glaucus. And the other gladiator was so strong, the Christian gladiator was so strong and very good in sword as well, that on the fight, this Christian gladiator brought down the preferred gladiator of Nero. And in that time, of course, when one gladiator were overcame by the other, the tradition, of course, were that, the one would kill the other. So when this Christian gladiator called Glaucus, very young man, strong, but he was Christian, very well versed in Christian knowledge, and by the way, he would go to the places to preach Jesus' words. There he was, brought down this Nero gladiator, the best of Neros, and Nero was very upset. He has the sword in his throat, waiting for the sign of Nero to kill or let him live. But imagine, the pressure was great. The circus was full, waiting for the spectacle to start. However, when Nero asked him to put the other man down, in despite of his pride, the Christian gladiator lifted the sword and gave the hand for that man laying down there, forgiving him and let him live. Nero was so angry, so fear, that he asked the soldiers, the centurions, to bring them and kill both outside Rome. However, there, when they were to be killed outside Rome, the soldiers couldn't kill both. They wounded both, but they weren't killed. They weren't killed. Both survived and were being taken care by Christians. At the same time that happened, Paul of Tarsus were in the same, or as the same days, were killed by the soldiers. We all remember in the Paul and Stephen. And he's saying this story that this young gladiator, the preferred gladiator of Rome, he was very angry. He was, fearless. But being taken care by the Christians all along the months, almost a year, he started hearing the teachings of Christ. He became a Christian man. A Christian. And tells the book a story that because they say that, the letter that Paul wrote to Timothy, remember that Timothy was the youngest apostle, the youngest man among the people that preach the gospel. They say that when the soldiers killed Paul of Tarsus in Rome, Paul had the letter to Timothy in his remains. Was the last letter that he wrote, and the last letter became, to be brought to the Timothy. So this gladiator, this young gladiator, had the mission to bring this letter to Timothy in Jerusalem. What happened here? When we talk about Jesus, we tend to remember all his story, right? There, when he was born in manger, so simple, so humble. We remember the miracles, the so-called miracles that he performed in always possible, many ways, different ways. But when I think today, those stories so well spread around the globe, that when we talk today, we have to see how those stories of Jesus have been acting, transforming lives since then. When I talk this young man, this young gladiator, transformed by the power of love, when I talk about Jesus, I'm talking about this young Christian man that in the moment of pressure that he could have killed the other man down there, he let him live. When I talk about Jesus, we have to see how his message, how his love has been sustaining these people in the hardest way that we can ever imagine. These Christians, even the young ones in that time, they were persecuted. They were brought to the circus, to humiliation. They were mocked. They were stoned. They were fired. They were burned. And then when we read there, and they were sitting around themselves in family, even among enemies that were in the past, and they were so grateful for the message of Jesus, and they were so grateful to be persecuted in the name of Christ, and they are so joyful to face that challenge. And then that's when we see Jesus. Because I guess sometimes we are so repeatedly remembering the stories of Jesus and the miracles and all the passages that we have memorized all that. But when we see how those people like us sometimes had taken those lessons and made this lesson live, real in their own existence, in the ways that they could. And today, when we want to see Jesus, when we want to talk about Jesus, I guess we have to see something different as well. We have to look around ourselves and see how the message of Jesus are changing lives, are making difference in our societies, in our family, in our community, in us. How is it Jesus to us? It's just stories. It's just the masses that we go into the Gospels, in the books that Spiritism brings to us, that we remember and we so much adore, that we so much feel emulated, stimulated. Is that we feel that our ideals grow inside of us, and we project ourselves to the future. And sometimes, despite that who we are now, we think that we are the person from 100 years from now, that we are the good person from 100 years, but we are not yet there. Sometimes we impersonalize that persona that we study, that we hear about Jesus. But I guess for us the real challenge is see Jesus making difference, real difference in our day-to-day life. It's when we face eye to eye to some of us that have differences, and put aside any difference, any issue that brings discomfort to us, and see Jesus is here. It's not about talking about Christ. It's not about accepting Christ. We all know this. And sometimes the most criminal mind, the most dejected person, that outcast of society, they are there. Sometimes we fail to see, but Jesus is make difference there. We tend not to look there to find Jesus. I remember this story. This man dressed in yellow, shackled in chains in the Bellevue Hospital, because Bellevue hospitals tend to treat prisoners, hardcore prisoners, ace gang members, and so forth, criminals of all kinds, but the hard ones. And the story of this man, he was shackled in chains. He was being interrogated and so forth, and he was being treated in the hospital. He was already by the 50 years. Committed 1,000 crimes, different crimes, member of maybe many gangs, Las Maras and MS-13 and so forth, from Hispanic nation. No one could see in that man a soul, a spirit. No one could see that man committed so many crimes. had brought so many life miseries, tears. Jesus were changing inside out of him. No one would see Jesus in that man. When someone would talk about Christ, no one would remember that fellow being in there. A prisoner, shackled, dejected. But he, sitting there in that table, in this, environment alone, shackled, had no way to escape. Only jail in front of him. No more hope. No more crimes to do. What is it he would thought to my life ended or will end for now? He would not remember all the crime that he had committed until that time. He would scan his life in some way. So many crimes, so many things, and all the mixture of pain, anger, killings, trafficking, and so forth. But there were inside of him something that he would never forget. That in that moment were starting lighting a little light inside of him for the future. Was the teachings that he received from his mom, that he almost wouldn't remember her face because she had died so young. He was like 7 to 9 years old and were exposed to all the criminality possible. But he would remember his mom talking about love of Christ in Christmas days that we have today. She would say to him about the miracles of Jesus, how much he loved. He would remember the time when his mom would talk that Jesus had forgiven criminals, that Jesus were crucified among two thieves, two robbers, two criminals, and Jesus had forgiven one of them and brought him to a good place in the spiritual world. And now he was there, shackled to chains, and say, is it my mom would, maybe she was saying truth. Maybe there was something in there, in this man, in this Jesus that I never, till this moment, had thought about and understood. Sometimes he would think about it, but, it can't be real. In the midst of all evil that I live, how could it be that a man crucified 2,000 years ago can change something in my environment, change something in my life? How can that be possible? If, the today's men, with all the possibilities that we have, the priests, the ministers and spiritists and so forth can't do. But there he was. And he couldn't think otherwise, differently. All his mind was set to the words of his mom. 45 years passed. Hours has passed. Until a moment, the responsible for his transference to Rick's Island prison came to take him. He was immersed in himself and trying to imagine the face of that Jesus that his mom would talk to him. When that man, the messenger to bring him to the jail, touched him and asked him to wake up, he told himself that from that moment on, he would change his life for the sake of that teaching that his mother would do to him when he was so young and so a kid. That the world that he had lived so far in criminality and so forth had brought him nothing more than pain, nothing more than illusions. nothing more than unhappiness. And in that split of seconds that he could really connect it, really observe that light, that love, the sprinkle of love that Jesus had reserved for him for this right moment. He felt something so different, so much good that he never until that moment had felt. And he said to himself, even though this moment is so little, it's like a grain of sand in the midst of, a beach, I would not change this little moment that I had thinking about Jesus with all the pleasures that I had doing what I have done for my whole lifetime. And he said, if I in a second, in a moment, could observe and feel something that would endure for eternity with me, in a moment like this with Christ, imagine if I could in some way work it out and have more in me for the future. Imagine if I give myself hard enough as I've done in criminality for doing my goodness and transform myself, how much Jesus would give me. And that's what happens. The evil can offer a lot of things to people, to us. All kinds of pleasures, power, influence. All kinds of things that the world thinks is good. But when we really stop, when we really open ourselves to Christ and feel His power, His love, we say to ourselves, I would not trade 10 minutes with Christ to 300 years with this so-called mundane power, mundane love, mundane happiness that is so in fashion. It's just the ones that yet didn't have this second with Jesus that maintains their pathway towards evil, towards error, towards committing wrongdoing. And we that are so every day immersed in Jesus' teachings, how much are we like absorbing this energy that is to fortify us, to make us endure the hardest, endure the difficulties and struggles of life. We were called for it. That's why we have been given the chance of learning Spiritism, going to the centers and learning about the Gospels and all that we have in Spiritism. It's not, of course, because we really deserve it per se, or credits of the past. It's chances. It's chances that we had. And this chance is for us not only to make difference in the world around ourselves, but of course, the real difference gets to start in us. It's not to make this chance a step for show, for this outside, fashion reality that we unfortunately are using in Spiritism sometimes. How come we come to a place like this and talk about Christ and all of He had done and is still doing to us? Remember His figure, His moments with the disciples. Remember when Peter, denied Him and Judas and others? the bad moments of the apostles, and he had treated them so lovingly. And we join together in this sacred place to talk about Christ, but when we meet with one another with our issues, there is fire. There is anger. There is jealousy. There is envy. When, I sometimes I feel like so there is something that doesn't connect. When we see this primitive Christian, how they join together in their meetings, when they got there, they were like this real family. Nothing could break them apart. Even when they were, someone afar from being good, they would say to one another, no, have patience with him, with her. They are not understanding the message yet. We have to give time to them. You have to nourish them with love. It is because those primitive Christians were so more close to the time of Jesus, or because these spirits, these people were really, really committed to the cause of giving themselves for the love, to live Jesus in reality, to see Jesus in our daily life. When we see someone in trouble, any kind of trouble, not only the trouble of health, of need of money, but in trouble in terms of vices, envy, gossip, this or that, any kind of extravagance, and we open our mouth to spread their bad habits. No, we are not living Jesus in that way. Jesus said there will be fake messiahs, fake Christs, right? False prophets. When we that are registered, we assume ourselves as Christians, spiritual Christians, and are behaving that way, we are those false prophets. We are the false spiritists. When we go to the place like this in front of you, and when I leave here, and I don't do my best, when I don't treat my friends in some way that I give my best, I'm just being so fake and so false that I should be ashamed of myself. It's not about being the best of the spirits, it's not being the best of Christians, none of that, of course. It's been about being the best of myself. Seeing Jesus in some way in reality. I've studied a book about how religion, especially the Christian religion, affects our families, how these religions transforms us, which ways they transform us. And those studies, those research came to conclusions. And one of the conclusions is that for the religion to really take place, change in our life, it should be acted in our life in three different dimensions. So we can effectively make difference in our life. One is in the church or in the center. If the religion that I have, the model, in this case we have the model of Jesus, right? We accept him as a model. If this model Jesus is not making difference in my church, in my center, in my relationship with the people in my center, one dimension of of it is compromised. It's not working. So it means that for the Spiritism works effectively in my life, it means that Spiritism has to work for me in this spiritual center with the people that lives and works in here. The second dimension is family. If the religion, if the Spiritism that I have is not making difference in my family, the other dimension is compromised. And the third dimension is community, is society, the community, except the center, except my family, but the community per se. So it means this three dimension has to be affected by the way I live, the message that I have. It means the things that we learn here has to work in here, has to work in my home, has to work in community. If it's one of these dimensions is compromised, it means that it's not making the loop, the circle. It's broken. It's broken. So it means that we have to move. That's why Christ, Jesus, when he came, he was surrounded by all these dimensions. His family, the community. Everywhere he went on preaching, he was helping, making difference in the lives that he encountered. And in the apostles that followed him, he changed their lives with his examples, with his influence in their lives. And of course, to the world per se. He covered all dimensions. So the teachings to us is that we take this and cover all the dimensions. It's not about knowing more. It's never been knowing more. The best spiritist will be never the one that knows more. It can't be that way. Will be for sure the one that loves more. The best spiritist is the one that loves more. Even though that person knows so very little, can be considered the best spiritist if she loves a lot. It's not the one that talks the best, has the more, views in Facebook, in Instagram, or some other places in media. It's not the ones. It's the one that outreach people in their homes, in their lives, in their problems. Dry their tears with their message. Go there, be loyal to friends. Don't betray on all those things that makes us good spiritists. Sometimes we are so fanatic about knowing things, but we are so careless about doing things. And that was not what Jesus wanted us to remember him in Christmas time or in this beginning of the year. It's so much to do on earth. We are surrounded by all kinds of problems or chaos. When we speak, ask for Christ's help, and he asks the same, what are you doing to change your environment? If we could hear his answer, maybe he would say that way, I've been doing my part. I've been doing my part before you even thought about it. And how about you? Tell me, what are you doing? What are you doing? And then when we do even the little thing, is that when Jesus through us is being channeled to this world. We are what we do. not what we say. It can't be. And then when people see what we do, our examples, they are prone, they are, in some way invited, suggested to follow. That's what Jesus were all about. It's not about because Christ were put in the cross. That counts, of course. That counts, of course. But if we follow the timeline of Christ, we can't, there's all thousands of examples that would inspire us. And today we are not so much inspired. We complain a lot about the problems that are surrounding our lives, family. We know all the problems that we have. But when we compare, or we dig a little to see the problems that are happening elsewhere, where bombs are falling, when there's nothing to eat, nothing to wear, nothing to think about it, just chaos, hatred, war, guns, nowhere to go, no one to really see you crying. And we just feel like, how much more I need to realize that I am so fortunate, that I am so much gifted. How much more I need as an asset to make things happen. Because it's hard to make things happen. It's not easy, of course, to make things happen. It's easy to see how it can happen. Sometimes it's easy to make plans, to see how it would happen. But to put the hands on and make it happen in reality is kind of hard. But we do have intelligence enough. We have all things enough to make things happen. It might not be easy for us this year to complete the resolutions that we have made so far, right? It might not be easy, and that is good, because maybe that the easy things doesn't make us so much, better. But we can, definitely we can do. If all those people in the past in much more hazard situation, more difficult problems, they overcame and they made it happen, inspired by the same teaching that we have today. Those primitive Christians and other Christians along the time, they had different teachings, except of course other religions. They made it happen. And they were common, they were people like us. Why not we can make it happen where we are when it happens? It costs us sometimes tears. We have a challenge for us to live Jesus. Live it in life. Feel it inside of us. See them in Christ in one another. Live the lessons every day in us, because we are so busy, distracted by so many things, that in places like this we don't see each other. We see bodies walking forth and speaking things that when 2 minutes from now we don't remember what a friend has said, what kind of problem they were. We just see people crisscrossing our front. I have a lot of examples like this. We can feel it. Sometimes I see people, and then I include in myself, we are like willingly, we come to the center and say, oh my God, maybe I'll find a person there to hear what I have to say, to ask me how I am, and truly sit there and ask what's going on, what they can do to me. But the fact is, sometimes we come to the center, out of the center, no one asks. And I go home and say, crying. Sometimes I speak to people here about to cry, about to explode in pain. And they don't know. They don't know. Either sometimes I think, maybe I'm a master of disguising myself. I'm so good at making myself not knowing what inside of me, or people are too blind to see what's going on with me, because I'm about to fall down, and the person that knows me for 10 years don't has a clue what's going on with me. Sometimes, we especially the people that works in preparing events, so forth. It's so hard sometimes to put an event together and make it all happen. When it's all happening, we are about to, to sit down and cry for 2 hours. All everything. The things that went wrong, all the saddest part, the deals that fail. In some way, we're about to cry and everything. We just want a person to ask us and just interact sometimes. And we are here crying. But people don't see that. They see that Adriano is walking back and forth. Someone is doing that. Happy. Above the situation, in control of everything. But truly inside of the person there are this river of some mixture feelings. Of not appreciation or this or that. There's a lot of things that go inside of a person because we are imperfect and it does happen. And there are the family that we grow together for many years, not yesterday, people that we met that they have no clue what's going on. And if the person sits down in the middle and start crying and fell down, there will be a huge surprise. Why that? You don't know this person. Why couldn't you have noticed something different in that person that comes here that know you for so long? You didn't know that she were sad the last days? She were so, or he were so like, smiling all the time, talkative for, now he's changing something, he's not talking so much. But those changes not noticed, and if it is noticed, no one bothers to ask. No one bothers to call. Let's have a coffee. I tried myself sometime and I had some problems. I called. Can you have a coffee with me sometime? I'm too busy, I can't, I'm sorry, I have a lot of things. Yep. And I say to myself, that's the person that I know for 10 years. And in the moment that I'm about to, but those people can't be for us, but Jesus are. Jesus is there. And that's why we're not criticizing each other. It does happen, and it's going to happen for a long time still. But it can improve. But it's just for us to remember that Christ is the one that is going to hear us all the time. He will be there for us in every situation, the good and the bad. And He is the one that will stand beside us and will reach us and makes us strong again. And will help us, accomplish what we came here on earth to accomplish in His name. In His name. The people that walks with us, men and women, children and youth, they are Christs. They are the Jesus. And I remember, I always remember this story. on Jesus when he passed away, and he wasn't yet shown for so many apostles. When he appeared to the two men walking, to the two apostles, that they were walking to Emmaus, right? Tells the story that two apostles left Jerusalem walking to Emmaus, the city a little far from Jerusalem. And along the way, they were talking about the what happened to the crucifixion of Jesus, the tragic situation that were in Jerusalem and so forth. And then this beggar joined them along the way. And then started a conversation with the beggar, and the beggar were talking a little bit about what happened in Jerusalem. They walked sometimes for a long distance. It's just when they arrived in the inn, or in the hotel in today's words, and then when they were eating together the dinner or the feast, is that when they realized that beggar were Jesus. But they realized that, at the end, when they were like having a little party, eating together. Sometimes we walk in with people in our life for all the lifetime. We don't realize that we're Jesus walking with us. And we don't see, we don't recognize. It's just when sometimes when we pass away to the other life, and then we see, oh my God, Janine were Jesus there. And I didn't recognize. How couldn't I see that she was Jesus? Just now, I see that. And it's all the people in our life, because Jesus said, when you give something to to the poor, to the criminal, it's to me that you are doing. It means whenever I offer something to someone, I offer in reality to the Christ. And it means that Christ is in some way, mirroring in that person. And most of the time we realize it kind of late. We need to pass away to the spiritual realm and get together again and see how important, how essential those people in my life were to me. And how much, careless in some way, how little importance I gave to them. And we would be so surprised that, you can't be far. You can just join with one another here and ask them to tell their life to you. You're gonna cry for sure if they tell you. You're gonna be surprised how much they went through in this lifetime, and sometimes just today. Things that you would never imagine that they were going through and went through in their lifetime, and you didn't think that the person were carrying so much that load. I guess it's time for us in the realms of the Christian spiritists is to join in love, in compassion, in empathy, getting to know each other's problems, being for each other, no matter what is the problem. What it is there that I can do for you, my friend, today. What's going on to you? Do you have a job? Do you have money? Do you have all kinds of questions of in life? Let's try it. And then we're going to see how the environment, how the energy of friendship, of family is. And we see how much Jesus will be bigger, larger. His dimensions will expand in our day-to-day life. There will be no more Adriano go to the center and going home and going to work, all those patterns that we are so, accustomed to that. There will be not only the programs of the center of the studies, all the schematics that we have, but there will be a movement of souls, of spirits, join to evolve, to hugely make a difference in this earth that's so much in need. The good spirits, the loving spirits, they are working tirelessly to make this world evolve, transform. But we have to join hands as well. And Christ will make miracles. That we sometimes now can't imagine. But we're gonna remember it, and when we say it, we're gonna say, oh my God, it did happen. Like, do you know the music of Silent Night, right? I don't know if you all know the stories of the music, but it is beautiful, the story of the music. But beautiful is that the commotion that sometimes one little music can bring to people, can awaken in people, and inspiring this little boy Jesus. It says that in the War of 1914, in the Western Europe, between German and French especially, in the Christmas time, the Pope asked for a truce between the two countries that were entrenched in war. But the generals wouldn't listen to the Pope, because they thought that if there were a truce between the countries in the war, the soldiers would soften themselves, and then, the war would be compromised. However, in the Christmas Eve, where the two sides were in trenches, to face them the other day for fight, covered in snow, the mountains and the peaks, suddenly in the Christmas Eve, a soldier in the German side left the trench, the other soldier in the other side left the trench, and in few hours, 100 soldiers in both sides were singing Silent Night and exchanging gifts. In that moment, they were no enemies. They were few hours ago in trenches with guns, trying the best way to kill the other enemies. Because of that little music that remembered the birth of Christ and his mission of peace and love, these two countries fearlessly, 100,000 soldiers, enemies for life, they've forgotten everything for that hours, for that night, to join in peace and exchange gifts and sing that song. Who else in this planet could make such a difference in that night, in that moment? Join two arms to forget everything for a while. In the other day, everyone came back to their sites, and of course later on fight started again. But at least for that night, a man that died in a cross between two thieves in 2,000 years or more years ago were the one that stopped them. Today, if there is war, there is a lot. But if there is peace, there is goodness, Jesus is there. Whenever we see one drop of goodness in this planet, there will be the name of Jesus in that little goodness. Be sure of that. And we hope that we are part of that history, part of this little goodness, and that we impersonate Jesus in some way in our day-to-day life, that not only we have to talk about Jesus, we're doing Jesus in our life. Yes, my time is over. I'm not sure. Thank you.